Good day. Bankers are very powerful people. And over the years, some banking families have become very reputable. They do a lot of good too, because as custodian of large monetary deposits, they tend to accumulate wealth for themselves and they influence a lot of things. In the period of the Renaissance, there was a very powerful banking family in Italy, Florence particularly, a banking family called the Medicis. We know about the great deeds they did, the way they supported the art. They supported Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci. They supported a lot of things. But like bankers are wont to do, they also supported a lot of wars. They funded and financed a lot of wars. In this modern day, there's been a banking family that got to have great renown, very powerful renown, to the extent that they influence almost the large part of what we see in today's geopolitical reality. That family is the Rothschild. The Rothschild are a banking family that have become very famous because their founder had five sons that he sent to five different countries and who opened up five powerful branches there. Over time, they've got to play big influence in politics of a lot of countries. In fact, it's said that the their influence has shaped the world in a large way because they tend to do a lot of good like the bankers tend to do, but they also funded a lot of wars, particularly the wars that involved Napoleon. You see, the Rothschild, because they now had brothers in France, in England, in Germany, and in all these other places, they funded the leaders of those countries. And when the British and Napoleon were at war, they funded both sides of the war. They didn't lose. At least one lost, one won. The Rothschilds are still very powerful in today's modern world. Particularly, they have a very big role to play in the Ukrainian war. You see, the Rothschilds have huge investments in Ukraine, very huge investments. Prior to all these times, they had cultivated Ukraine for quite a long time, and they have well over $53 billion in investment in Ukraine across many investment portfolios. But beyond that, they also have advisory roles they play. They are very well embedded in the Ukrainian economy. The Rothschild have their headquarters in London, and it may just be that it is for this financial involvement, this role that the bankers play, that Britain is so committed to the Ukraine-Russia war. Another powerful player on the global scene or as related to the Ukraine war is Macron. Emmanuel Macron worked for the Rothschild in Paris before he became the president of France. In fact, his rapid rise may just have been funded by the Rothschild. So when we see the hand of Britain in this Ukrainian war, Britain is a very prominent player. Maybe not on the war as giving out soldiers and all that, but Britain is the most dogged and most committed country beside the Ukrainians themselves that are in this war. In fact, the British have boots on ground in many roles, but mostly in instructions roles, in the roles of advisors, next shoulder to shoulder with the Ukrainians in the battlefield. And it is for this reason that in a recent operation, we got to find out that some British officers were caught and captured in an operation carried out by the Russian military. Good day and welcome to my channel, Ebima Mungo's Perspective on Global Affairs. If you're new to this channel, please subscribe. If you Have any comments regarding the ideas and opinions I expressed in this video, please put them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Bankers play a very significant role in shaping the world we know. They do a lot of good in helping enterprise and helping countries develop. They also do a lot of harm in funding and financing wars. The Ukraine war has a very clear hand of the Rothschilds. The Rothschilds are a very influential banking family that have been on the scene for over 200 years, and they still are a powerful family till today. So when it came, and you see that British involvement in this war is so dogged and committed. And when you also see that the French involvement is dogged and committed, it may just have to do something to do with these political leaders in tune with their banking friends, committed to retrieving their investments back from the Russians, who have not only balkanized and taken a large chunk of Ukraine, 5 oblasts. They've taken the most lucrative part of Ukraine, the most productive, where they used to have coal and where it is thought they have lithium and rare earth metals. Most of Ukraine's wealth, valued at over $15 trillion, resides in the Donbas region, made up of Donetsk and Lugansk. And it is for this reason that the investments, because we should know that London, Paris, and New York are very financialized locations these days. The whole economies of Europe, these two countries are called in Europe, and America, is to a large extent financialized. It is one where financiers invest in mines, invest in businesses, invest in productive assets, and through the fact that they control large, vast resources of money, big catches of money, they buy into all these mines and they collect rent on it. A good example would be the investments made by Shell BP, or the investors in Shell BP, the investors in Chevron, the investors all over the Middle East. These investors look for where there are assets for them to be able to invest and make money. And they all reside mainly in London. There's a third player in this game now, and that third player is Friedrich Merz. Friedrich Merz is now the Chancellor of Germany. And as the Chancellor of Germany, he had a background. He came from finance. He was the head of the biggest financial company in the world called Blackrock. Blackrock controls assets under management of $10 trillion. They are the hugest juggernaut in the financial world by miles. Through this asset they control, made up primarily of pension funds of so many Americans, so many institutional organizations in America, they now sit on this amount of money that is called dry cake, and because of that, they can buy assets all across the world, and their assets do a lot of good, most times, for Americans and American investors and American pensioners. But they want also a piece of Ukraine, and they've also invested in Ukraine. And as Friedrich Merz was once their leader in Europe, he too understands that the investments that BlackRock initiated or have or supported that have been lost to the Russians. It recently emerged that the Russians captured some British operatives in a special operation in Orchakiv. Russian fighters penetrated Ukrainian rear in boats. During the operation called Skat 12, British officers were captured helping Ukrainian armed forces guide missiles and drones. They were also carrying out cyber attacks. The British have been involved in this war wholesale because we know that they were among the first to give the Ukrainians long-range missiles. Their Storm Shadow missiles were used in destroying the Kerch Bridge at one time, and since then, the Russians have taken actions against them. The Russians have repeatedly warned the British that they see the hand they're playing in this war. They see the hand and they have made repeated appeals against the British and tell them to stay off, but the British didn't. And recently, the Russians have stepped up and started attacking British assets and British investments within Ukraine. The other day, they launched an attack on a former visa center in Kiev. They have also said that the British are very involved in all the special operations being carried out by the Ukrainians, like Operation Spiderweb. Operation Spiderweb was planned, as the Russians said, by the MI6 and the British and the Ukrainian SBU. The Ukrainian SBU has leaned a lot on the British, just as the British have become very dogged, maybe motivated by the personal animosities of the politicians, but also maybe also motivated by the need for these investors in Ukraine, the banking investors, to gain back their assets. One of the things we should know about Ukraine and the Russia, in fact, is that these are countries that had large stock of oligarchs. Oligarchs, because of the access to finance, tended to be mainly Jews, mainly, most times. That is, by no means they are the only ones, but they are mainly Jews. And now they have a Jewish president in Ukraine, and that Jewish president is Zelensky. He finds himself in a place filled with Orthodox Christians. But when it comes to the oligarchs of both Russia and Ukraine, they are mainly Jews. And it is for that reason that when Putin was cracking down on these oligarchs, a lot of them ran to Israel, and they are now part of the Israeli lobby. The Israeli lobby, ironically, invested so much in the labor and invested so much in Keir Starmer's campaign to be prime minister. But even then, the attacks going on in Ukraine has become a source of concern for even the people who are running Ukraine. Recently, the head of the Ukrainian military intelligence, Kyrylo Budanov, started to say that he worries about the state of Ukraine. He said Ukraine may cease to exist because as the war is going on and Ukraine is losing on the war front, they lost Chasiv the other day. They are also losing in Kupiansk. They are losing in Zaporizhia, and the Russians are getting closer and creating their buffer zones in Sumy and in Kharkiv. They are in a bad place. Repeatedly, the Russians continue to bomb into Ukraine, continue to bomb into all the cities of Ukraine, including Kiev, and there's no response. There are no air defenses. And so this Ukrainian military intelligence chief, Kyrylo Budanov, said that Ukraine could cease to exist as a state if Ukrainian society cannot figure out what it wants and what it should do. He used a very pertinent analogy. He said, I collect stamps and I'm a philatelist. Many of the countries whose stamps are examined no longer exist. So we need to seriously think about what we are doing and where we need to go. This is the questions, this is what he is saying now, that Ukrainians should worry about the reality they find themselves now, because the Russians not only want to capture these five oblasts, they probably may go ahead and capture Odessa. And if they capture Odessa, they may just cut off Ukraine from access to the Black Sea, and the Ukraine that may be left will become a rump state, unable to function economically, and not wanted by the European Union because Poland and Hungary see themselves to be a threat by Ukraine that will be entering the European Union and taking and getting access and preferential access to all the goodies of the European Union that tended to go the way of Hungary and Poland, especially those that have to do with agriculture, because Ukraine is a very powerful agricultural country. So they fear and they don't want Ukraine in the European Union. So if they don't let Ukraine, because European Union mechanism to get to be a member includes acceptance by all 27 members in agreement. So if they don't agree, if Hungary doesn't agree, if Slovakia doesn't agree, if Poland, even though Poland is very close to them now, doesn't agree, it may become a problem, a very big problem for the Ukrainians, and they may just not be able to survive in this reality they find themselves as they keep going forward, as the Russians keep going forward. Well, the Ukrainians have not particularly lost hope, even though President Trump has been saying repeatedly that he doesn't want to support the Ukrainian effort again. He believes $350 billion that was given to the Ukrainians as aid by the Biden administration is enough. Even though they want arms and they want military, and even if they are in a bad place, as they find themselves in a bad place now, President Trump expects that European countries and NATO countries will buy arms and sell them to Ukraine. But President Trump has been playing a very funny game. He needs senators, and because he needs senators to pass bills, the Senate and the Congress have very thin margins of Republican leadership control. And for that, he has to balance his relationship with these senators and with these congressmen. To a large extent, a lot of them support his bills, but yet there's bipartisan support for Ukraine in the House of in the Congress and in the Senate. And when Trump says he's not going to put any money for Ukraine in the 2026-2027 big beautiful bill that he had passed, US senators have decided that they will take that initiative, just as they took the initiative in trying to put forward a bone-crushing bill, a bone-crushing $500 billion, 500% tariffs on countries that support Ukraine, led by Lindsey Graham and Ken Blumenthal. They have also come together now and said they are proposing $55 billion in aid to Ukraine. US senators proposed $55 billion Ukraine aid bill. The lawmakers unveiled this. A group of US senators have introduced a bill to allocate $55.6 billion in aid to Ukraine over the 2026-27 fiscal year. President Donald Trump has repeatedly said that he opposes any aid to Ukraine, but these senators are insisting, and they hope to pass this in a bipartisan way. What they've also done is that they want to increase the amount of money that the president is able to draw down in the presidential drawdown authority. As at this moment, it is just what he is able to draw down only $100 million, but they want to push it up to $6 billion so that he can have leverage to be able to send more money to Ukraine. Ukraine is really in a bad place, and President Zelensky has already said that they are going to have a shortfall of $65 billion in their account. Zelensky has called for the complete seizure of the $300 billion that is frozen, Russian asset that is frozen. And this bill that is calling for more money, $54 billion to Ukraine, but the senators are proposing also that the money should not come from the American taxpayers, but that should come from that frozen asset, Russian frozen asset. So in effect, The senators are proposing that that money should be taken completely, not frozen, should be seized and be used in supporting Ukraine. Ukraine has become very dependent. It's an aid-dependent country now. Ukraine and the Ethiopia of 1980 are almost getting to be in the same. But maybe they are not there yet. But an economy that can't produce arms, needs aid of military aid, need financial aid for his pensioners, need financial aid to pay salaries of his soldiers, is not in a good place. Because even President Zelensky is saying that he needs at least $40 billion of support from the European Union so that he can at least be able to pay the salaries of its soldiers at the war front. When these soldiers, salaries of soldiers come to be an issue of discussion, it creates some serious worries. It creates some worries in the minds of the soldiers up there in the war front, warriors whom a lot of people have commended for their fighting spirit, but who these days may just be weighed down by the fact that they are not only losing their biggest benefactor in USA, they are losing to innovative strategies of the Russians who now use maneuver tactics, use drones, use new methods that is overwhelming them on the war front. Now, after all that, they may not be also paid. There's a big issue about pay. Apart from paying them when they are alive, they may also not be paid when they are dead because the Russians have been sending dead bodies, quite a lot of them. They sent 6,000 dead Ukrainians the other day, and they are also they proposed in their last meeting in Istanbul that they will be sending 3,000 more dead bodies of the Ukrainians back. When they send this money, because Ukraine has a commitment to pay as much as $200,000 to the families of the dead, Ukraine is in a bad place and cannot pay that, and Ukraine is not too willing to accept the dead bodies. In fact, Ukraine tends to list most of her dead as missing in action. These are all strategies to try and avoid new strains on the very thin budget of Ukraine, which is suffering now at a time that Europe themselves are also suffering. Europe is suffering, and despite the fact that Europe is suffering, President Trump exacted a very powerful pressure on EU the other day. The EU, like I said, the whole of the countries of Europe are seriously suffering from separation anxiety, worried that America may be leaving NATO and taking our troops out of Europe. That has made Ursula von der Leyen to make one of the most incredulous concessions to the Americans recently, claiming that she will be buying $250 million worth of American hydrocarbon and oil and gas, invest $600 million in the American economy, and open their markets to zero tariff of American goods while taking on 15% tariff in the American market to be able to sell to the American market. It was such a deal that was so lopsided and made a lot of analysts to scratch their head that they wondered what may have just cost the von der Leyen, who was always standing side by side Biden to say we shall support Ukraine till the end as long as it takes, and who only just 2 or 3 weeks ago initiated and finally put into law the 18th round of package of sanctions against Russia. Someone who had always talked tough against Russia, who went to China to try and talk tough to the Chinese, she's been reduced to making such huge concessions to Donald Trump because they have the fear that Trump may leave, signal and tell the Americans to leave NATO, or at least draw down their soldiers in NATO. This is causing a lot of worry, not only for the Europeans, but the Baltic states. The Baltic states came to Washington, D.C., had a meeting with Peter Hegseth. The defense ministers and officials of the Baltic states came and met with Peter Hegseth, the Secretary of Defense of America. And rather than tell them that they will have support of Americans, they were told that America will be noticing what is going on. In short, there was ambiguity in the answer that Petersburg gave them. They are worried. They are really worried at this time that Russia is unrelenting and blowing up all the NATO officials they can find anywhere. Now that they've captured these British officers, they even mentioned the names of the British officers that were caught in this Operation Scat. They mentioned them as they mentioned the British officers as one was a lieutenant colonel, that was caught in Okochev. I forget his name. And another, there were two of them. They were all caught, and they mentioned their names, they mentioned their ranks, and they mentioned their military formation. And yet, the British quickly reached out to the Russians and told them that those military personnel, British military personnel that were found there, were just mainly tourists. They were not military personnel. They were British tourists, embedded, obviously, with the Ukrainian army. The British may have been sent by the bankers to help support Ukraine to be able to retrieve their investment, but it may just be a bridge too far for them. This is one investment and this is one bet that the Rothschild may just have to, after a while, concede that they have lost out. Already, people are thinking that even if the Ukrainians lose this war and there's a peace settlement, there shall always be British underhand actions with helping the Ukrainians to try and undermine the 5 territories that Russia now has, and also work towards one day the eventual defeat of Russia and the reabsorption of these 5 provinces back into Ukraine. This is where I end my video for today. If you're new to my channel, please subscribe. If you have any comments regarding the opinions I've expressed today, please leave them in the comment section. Do well to like and share. Until I see you in my next video. Goodbye.